They say the moment you meet your fated mate, the world stops turning. The moon herself reaches down from the heavens and binds your souls with silver thread that can never be broken. They say it's the most beautiful moment of your life. They lied. Because when Alpha Cedric Ashford looked into my eyes at the mating ceremony, the world didn't stop. Shattered. And when he opened his mouth to speak the words that would bind us forever, what came out instead was the one word that would destroy me. I reject you. My name is Rowena, and this is the story of how I was cast aside by the most powerful alpha in the realm. Only to discover that the moon goddess had other plans. Plans that would shake the very foundations of our world and prove that sometimes, rejection is just the beginning of your true destiny. Before we begin this journey together, I need you to do something for me. If this story speaks to your soul, if you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or cast aside, leave a comment below. Tell me the city you're watching from so that I can send you a hug across the miles. Because you, dear listener, deserve to know that your story isn't over either. Now settle in. This tale is long, it's raw, and it will change everything you thought you knew about fate. The great hall of the Ashford Pack was ablaze with candlelight the night my world ended. Hundreds of white candles flickered against stone walls that had stood for centuries, their warm glow reflecting off the ancient tapestries depicting the first wolves blessed by the moon goddess herself. The air was thick with anticipation and the heady scent of night-blooming jasmine that had been woven into garlands and draped from every archway. I stood in the antechamber, my hands trembling as my mother, Millicent, adjusted the silver circlet in my dark hair for the 100th time. The ceremonial gown I wore was simple, white linen that fell to my feet, cinched at the waist with a cord of braided silver. All unmated she-wolves wore the same. We were meant to be blank canvases, allowing the mate bond to paint its own story without the distraction of finery or status. "Breathe, Rowena," my mother whispered, her weathered hands gentle on my shoulders. "The goddess has a plan for you. She always does." I wanted to believe her. Goddess, how I wanted to believe her. I was 22 summers old, the daughter of Aldrich the blacksmith, a man of no particular rank or distinction in the pack hierarchy. We lived in a modest cottage on the eastern edge of pack lands, where my father's forge had served the pack for 30 years. My mother tended a small herb garden and helped the pack healer when needed. We were common folk, unremarkable, but I had dreams. Oh, how I had dreams. Since I was a child, I'd been visited by visions during the full moon, flashes of silver light, whispers in ancient tongues I shouldn't understand but somehow did, images of wolves running beneath skies that glittered with impossible stars. The pack elders dismissed them as the fanciful imaginings of a lonely girl. Even my parents smiled indulgently when I spoke of them, patting my hand and suggesting I spend less time wandering the forests alone. Only old Edith, the pack's eldest healer, looked at me with something like knowing in her clouded eyes. "Mark my words, child," she'd told me on my 16th birthday. "You carry something ancient. Something that sleeps but will not sleep forever." I hadn't understood then. I wasn't sure I understood now. The bells began to toll, deep, resonant peals that signaled the ceremony's beginning. My heart hammered against my ribs as my mother kissed my forehead and hurried to take her place in the hall. I joined the line of 20 other unmated she-wolves, all of us barely breathing, all of us hoping that tonight we would find the other half of our souls. The massive oak doors swung open, and we processed into the great hall in single file. The pack filled every available space, hundreds of wolves dressed in their finest, all eyes tracking our movement as we walked the length of the hall toward the raised dais where Alpha Cedric stood. And goddess help me, he was magnificent. Cedric Ashford was 28, tall and broad-shouldered, with golden hair that caught the candlelight like a crown. His eyes were the color of amber, sharp and intelligent, missing nothing. He wore the traditional ceremonial garb of the Alpha, black leather breeches and a tunic embroidered with the silver wolf sigil of our pack. At his throat hung the Alpha's medallion, passed down through 15 generations of Ashford wolves. He was powerful. He was respected. He was everything an Alpha should be. And when his eyes swept over the line of she-wolves and landed on me, everything inside me ignited. The mate bond slammed into my chest like a physical blow. I gasped, my hand flying to my heart as golden threads of light, visible only to me, spun out from my chest and reached toward him. The world tilted, color suddenly more vivid, sound sharper, every nerve ending in my body singing with recognition. Mine, my wolf whispered, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. Me. I watched Cedric's face, desperate to see the same recognition, the same overwhelming joy that was flooding through me despite my humble origins. Surely he felt it too. Surely he. His expression didn't change. No softening of those amber eyes. No sharp intake of breath. No step forward in eager anticipation. Instead, something cold flickered across his features. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. And when Elder Whitmore, the ceremony's officiant, called for him to approach and identify his mate from among us, Cedric descended from the dais with the measured steps of a man walking toward an execution rather than his destiny. He stopped in front of me. Eyes met. And I knew in that moment that he felt the bond. I could see it in the barely controlled tension in his shoulders, in the way his hands clenched at his sides. He felt it, and it terrified him. "Rowena, daughter of Aldrich," he said, his voice carrying through the silent hall. The formal words of recognition. The first step in the bonding ritual. "Alpha Cedric," I whispered, my voice trembling. I reject you." 4 words. 4 simple words that might as well have been a knife to my heart. The hall erupted in shocked gasps and frantic whispers. Rejection at the mating ceremony was almost unheard of. The mate bond was considered sacred, a gift from the moon goddess herself. To reject one's mate was to reject the goddess's will, to spit in the face of destiny. But alphas had that right. It was written in the ancient laws. An alpha could reject a mate if he deemed the match unsuitable for the pack's future. I staggered backward, the golden threads that had spun from my chest now blackening, withering, turning to ash. The pain was indescribable, like my very soul was being torn in half, set on fire, drowned in ice all at once. "No," I gasped, clutching my chest. "No, please. You are not suitable to stand as Luna," Cedric continued, his voice flat, emotionless. But I saw his hands shake. I saw the muscle jumping in his jaw. "You lack the proper training, the proper lineage, the proper strength. I cannot, in good conscience, bind myself to a mate who would weaken the pack's position." "Cedric." I reached for him, desperate, pleading. He stepped back, avoiding my touch like it would burn him. "The rejection is witnessed and recorded. It is done." Elder Whitmore looked stricken, his ancient face pale with shock. "Alpha, are you certain? The mate bond is not something to be taken lightly." "I am certain." Cedric's voice hardened to steel. "Let us continue with the ceremony." He turned away from me, climbed back to the dais, and I was left standing in the center of the hall, my white gown now feeling like a burial shroud, every eye in the pack staring at me with a mixture of pity and horror. My mother's cry of anguish cut through the whispers. I saw my father trying to reach me, but the pack guards held him back. Custom dictated that rejected wolves must leave the ceremony unaccompanied, must walk the path of shame alone. So I did. I turned and walked back down that endless hall, my head held high even as tears streamed down my face, even as the pain in my chest threatened to drive me to my knees. I walked past wolves who averted their eyes, past young pups who didn't understand what they'd witnessed, past old Edith who looked at me with such profound sadness that it nearly broke me. I walked out of the great hall, out into the cool night air where the full moon hung heavy and bright in the sky, and I kept walking. Away from the pack house. Away from the village. Away from everything I'd ever known. I walked into the forest, into the deep darkness beneath the ancient trees, and finally, when I was far enough away that no one could hear, I fell to my knees and screamed. I don't know how long I stayed in that forest clearing, my body racked with sobs, the pain of the broken mate bond making every breath agony. It felt like something vital had been ripped out of me, leaving behind a hollow, bleeding wound that would never heal. The stories I'd heard about rejected wolves suddenly made terrible sense. They said rejected wolves never fully recovered. Some went feral, their human minds shattered by the pain. Others simply faded, losing the will to eat, to sleep, to live. Within a year, most rejected wolves were dead, their bodies giving up what their hearts could no longer endure. Was that my fate now? To waste away, becoming nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered at future mating ceremonies. Remember Rowena, daughter of Aldrich, the blacksmith's girl who was rejected by Alpha Cedric. Poor thing. She never recovered. No, I whispered into the darkness, my voice hoarse from screaming. No, I won't fade. I won't give him that satisfaction. But even as I said the words, I could feel my strength ebbing. The mate bond severance had taken something essential from me. My wolf, usually a constant presence in my mind, was silent, curled in on herself, whimpering with a pain beyond words. I forced myself to stand on shaking legs. I had to keep moving. If I stayed still, the pain would consume me entirely. So I walked deeper into the forest, with no destination in mind, guided only by some primal instinct to put distance between myself and the source of my agony. The moon followed me through the canopy, her light dappling the forest floor with silver patches that seemed almost alive. How long did I walk? Hours. Days. Time lost all meaning. I drank from streams when I crossed them, ignored the gnawing hunger in my belly, put one foot in front of the other in an endless, mindless rhythm. I was vaguely aware when I crossed the boundary markers that separated Ashford Pack territory from the wild lands beyond. The unclaimed forests stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction, home to rogues and wild beasts and things even darker. It was dangerous to be here alone, especially for a she-wolf weakened by rejection. I couldn't bring myself to care. On the third night, or was it the fourth? I collapsed beside a massive oak tree, my body finally giving out. I slumped against its trunk, staring up through its branches at the full moon above. She was so bright tonight, brighter than I'd ever seen her. Her light almost painful to look at directly. Why? I whispered to that luminous face. Why give me a mate only to have him reject me? What cruel game are you playing, goddess? The forest was silent except for the whisper of wind through leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of some small creature in the underbrush. I closed my eyes, exhausted beyond measure. Perhaps I would simply sleep here and never wake. Perhaps that would be a mercy. But as consciousness began to slip away, I felt something. A warmth spreading through my chest, starting from the exact spot where the mate bond had shattered. It wasn't painful, quite the opposite. It felt like being wrapped in sunlight, like coming home after a long journey, like a mother's embrace and a lover's kiss and the first breath of spring all at once. My eyes flew open. The forest was glowing. Silver light poured from the sky in visible streams, concentrating around me like liquid starlight. It swirled and eddied, forming patterns that reminded me of the visions I'd had as a child. And in that light I saw her, the moon goddess herself. She wasn't what I expected. Not some ethereal, distant deity too beautiful and perfect to be real. She looked like a woman, tall and strong, with long silver hair that moved as if caught in a wind I couldn't feel, and eyes that held all the wisdom and sorrow of the ages. She was ancient and young all at once, terrible and beautiful, and looking at her made me want to weep and laugh and bow down all at the same time. "Rowena, daughter of Aldrich," she said, her voice like music and thunder combined. "Daughter of my daughter's daughter's daughter. So many generations removed that your pack has forgotten what you carry in your blood." I tried to speak, but no sound came out. I could only stare. She moved closer, and I realized she wasn't walking. She was floating, her bare feet inches above the forest floor. When she knelt before me, the light intensified until it was almost blinding. "I did not give you a mate only to have him reject you, child. I gave you a mate to test you, to forge you in the fires of rejection so that you might emerge stronger than you ever dreamed possible." I don't understand," I managed to croak. Her hand reached out and pressed against the center of my chest, right over my heart. The warmth I'd felt before intensified 100-fold, and I gasped as power flooded into me. Ancient primal power that sang through my veins like lightning. You are mine, Rowena. Not Cedric's. Not any male's. And I am marking you as I should have marked you at birth, had the time been right. Her eyes bored into mine. You are my chosen. My champion. My equal to any alpha who walks this earth. But I'm nobody, I whispered. Just a blacksmith's daughter. You are the last daughter of the silver line, she interrupted, her voice fierce. The bloodline I created in the first days, when I walked among wolves and taught them to shift, to bond, to build packs. Your ancestors were my priestesses, my warriors, my voice in the mortal world. But as centuries passed and packs became more patriarchal, more focused on alpha bloodlines and inheritance, your line was forgotten, pushed aside, reduced to common rank. She pulled her hand back, and I looked down to see a mark glowing on my skin, a silver crescent moon perfectly formed right over my heart. But you are not common, Rowena. You never were. And Cedric's rejection, though it pained you, has freed you from a bond that would have crippled you. He is strong, yes, but he is ruled by tradition, by fear of change, by the need to maintain power through conventional means. You would have withered beside him, your true self suppressed to fit the mold of what a Luna should be. I stared at the mark, watching it pulse with light in rhythm with my heartbeat. The pain of the rejected bond was still there, but it felt distant now, muffled beneath this new power that filled me. What am I supposed to do? Yes. The goddess smiled, and it was a smile full of teeth and promises. You are going to become what you were always meant to be. You are going to grow stronger than any she-wolf alive. You are going to master gifts that have not been seen in generations. And then, Rowena, you are going to return to your pack. Return. The thought sent panic shooting through me. Why would I ever? Because darkness is coming, she said, her expression sobering. A threat that will consume pack after pack if not stopped. Cedric will need you, though he doesn't know it yet. The pack will need you. And you will save them all, not as Luna, but as something far greater. She stood, her form already beginning to fade, becoming translucent like morning mist. Wait. I struggled to my feet. I don't know how to do any of this. I don't know what gifts you're talking about or how to fight or... You will learn, she said, her voice growing distant. I have arranged for teachers. Follow the silver light, Rowena. It will guide you to those who will help you become who you are meant to be. Trust in yourself. Trust in me. And remember, you are not rejected. You are chosen. And then she was gone, the silver light dissipating like smoke, leaving me alone in the dark forest once more. But not the same as before. Oh no, not the same at all. I looked down at my hands and watched as silver light flickered beneath my skin, dancing along my veins like liquid moonlight. I felt my wolf stirring in my mind, no longer whimpering and broken, but curious, alert, and somehow different, stronger. When I looked up at the moon again, I could swear she winked at me. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes, centering myself. And there, faint but unmistakable, I felt a pull. Direction. A path forward lit by silver light only I could see. So I began to walk. The silver light led me north for 3 days and nights, through forests so old and thick that sunlight barely penetrated their canopy. I should have been exhausted, hungry, afraid. Instead, I felt energized, focused, driven by purpose for the first time in my life. The mark on my chest pulsed warmly with each step, and I noticed changes happening to my body. My senses sharpened. I could hear a deer moving a quarter-mile away, could smell rain coming hours before the first clouds appeared, could see in darkness that would have left me blind before. My wolf was more present than ever, no longer a separate voice in my head but part of me, integrated in a way I'd never experienced. On the 4th day, I emerged from the forest into a valley I'd never seen on any map. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way. A crystal-clear lake surrounded by meadows of wildflowers, with mountains rising in the distance like sentinels. And in the center of the valley stood a single cottage, smoke rising from its chimney. The silver light pulsed urgently, guiding me toward the cottage. I approached cautiously, aware that I was intruding on someone's territory. But before I could knock, the door swung open to reveal an old woman with hair like silver wire and eyes that gleamed with ancient intelligence. "About time you arrived, Chosen," she said in a voice that creaked with age. "I've been waiting 40 years for you. Come in, come in. We have much work to do and not nearly enough time." I stepped inside the cottage and my breath caught. The interior was much larger than it should have been, the laws of space seeming not to apply here. Shelves lined every wall, packed with books and scrolls and strange objects I couldn't identify. Herbs hung drying from the rafters. A fire crackled merrily in a stone hearth, over which bubbled a cauldron that smelled of things both wonderful and terrible. "My name is Rowena," the old woman said, shutting the door behind me. "I was the last priestess of the silver line before you, chosen by the goddess 73 years ago. I've been living here ever since, maintaining the old knowledge, waiting for the bloodline to produce another strong enough to bear her mark." "You were chosen too?" I asked, touching the mark on my chest. Rowena nodded, pulling aside her shawl to reveal a faded version of the same crescent moon mark on her own chest. "I was. But my calling was different than yours. I was meant to be a keeper of knowledge, a guardian of the old ways. You, child, are meant to be a warrior." Over the next weeks, or was it months? Time moved strangely in that valley. Rowena taught me things I'd never imagined possible. She taught me about the silver line, about how we were created to be the balance to alpha power. In the first days, before packs became rigid hierarchies dominated by males, the silver daughters walked beside alphas as equals, sometimes as mates, sometimes as advisors, always as the embodiment of the goddess's will. But as packs grew larger and more territorial, as wars were fought and alliances forged through strategic matings, the role of the silver daughters became inconvenient, Rowena explained one evening as we sat by the fire. Alphas wanted control, wanted power concentrated in their bloodlines. The silver daughters, answerable to the goddess alone, were a threat to that control. So gradually, over centuries, your line was marginalized. Your ancestors were stripped of rank, their gifts suppressed, their history erased from pack records. But why didn't the goddess stop it? I asked, anger rising in my chest. Why did she allow her own priestesses to be cast aside? "Because free will is sacred, even to her," Rowena said quietly. She could not force packs to honor the silver line. All she could do was wait for the bloodline to produce someone strong enough to reclaim what was lost. Her eyes met mine. "She waited for you, Rowena." Rowena taught me to fight, not with the raw brutality that most pack warriors employed, but with grace and precision. She moved like water despite her age, showing me how to use an opponent's strength against them, how to strike at pressure points that could incapacitate without killing, how to move so quickly that I seemed to vanish and reappear. She taught me to access the gifts that came with the goddess's mark, the ability to call on moonlight even in darkness, to heal wounds with a touch, to sense truth and lies, to project my consciousness beyond my body and see through the eyes of other wolves. "You are marked as Cedric's equal," she said during one training session, after I'd successfully disarmed her for the first time. "That means you are an alpha, Rowena. Not in the traditional sense, not ruling a pack through bloodline and brute force. But in the truest sense, a wolf with power, with gifts, with a strength to lead and protect. The mark makes it so." I struggled with that concept. An alpha. Me. The rejected blacksmith's daughter. But as my training progressed, I felt the truth of it settling into my bones. The mark on my chest glowed brighter with each passing day. My wolf grew larger, stronger. Her presence in my mind that of an equal partner rather than a submissive creature. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I stood taller, moved with confidence I'd never possessed, and my eyes held a silver gleam that marked me as other, as different, as chosen. One day, a man appeared in the valley. He was perhaps 40 years old, battle-scarred and serious, with the bearing of a warrior. Rowena introduced him as Edmund, once beta of a pack in the Western Territories, now a rogue who'd chosen exile over serving an alpha he didn't respect. Edmund will teach you what I cannot, Rowena said. Strategy, pack dynamics, how to identify and exploit weaknesses. You must understand the world you'll be returning to, Rowena. You must be prepared not just to fight, but to lead. Edmund was a harsh teacher, pushing me harder than Rowena ever had. He forced me to study pack histories, to learn the intricate web of alliances and rivalries that connected the major packs, to understand resource management and territory disputes and the 100 other factors that went into leading wolves. You think being strong is enough? He growled after I'd complained about another night of studying dusty old pack records. Strength means nothing without wisdom. You want to save your pack from this coming darkness. Then you'd better damn well know how to organize a defense, how to forge alliances, how to make the hard decisions that will keep wolves alive even when every choice before you is terrible. He was right, of course. I threw myself into the studies with the same intensity one brought to physical training. A year passed. Then another. I grew stronger, smarter, more capable with each passing season. The mark on my chest blazed bright now, no longer needing moonlight to glow. It radiated power constantly, a visible sign of what I'd become. I learned to shift faster than any wolf Edmund had ever seen, my transformation taking mere seconds instead of the minutes most wolves required. My silver form was larger than a normal she-wolf, nearly the size of a beta, with eyes that glowed like molten moonlight. I learned to fight multiple opponents at once, to strategize on the fly, to lead mock battles against Edmund and the handful of other rogues who'd found their way to Rowena's valley over the years. But perhaps most importantly, I learned to be comfortable with power. To not apologize for my strength, to not diminish myself to make others comfortable, to own my gifts without arrogance or false humility. I was not Rowena the blacksmith's daughter anymore. I was Rowena the chosen, the silver daughter, the goddess's champion, and I was ready. On the night of the 2nd anniversary of my arrival in the valley, Rowena called me to the lake. The full moon hung heavy overhead, turning the water to liquid silver. "It's time," she said simply. "The darkness I mentioned, the threat the goddess warned you about, it's begun. Packs in the eastern territories are being attacked. Whole villages slaughtered, wolves torn apart by something that hunts in the night. The attacks are moving west, toward Ashford Pack territory." My heart clenched. Despite everything, despite Cedric's rejection and the pain he'd caused me, the thought of my pack, my parents, old Edith, the children I'd watched grow, being slaughtered made my blood run cold. "What is it?" I asked. "What's attacking them?" "We don't know for certain," Edmund said, appearing from the shadows. "But the survivors speak of creatures that shouldn't exist, wolves twisted into something monstrous, possessed by a hunger that can't be satisfied. They're organized, intelligent, and virtually unstoppable. Cedric won't be able to fight them," Rowena added quietly. "Not with conventional methods. He'll need the old magic, the gifts that have been lost to the packs. He'll need you whether he wants to admit it or not." I stared out at the moonlit lake, feeling the weight of destiny settling on my shoulders. 2 years ago I'd been rejected, broken, left to die in the forest. Now I was being asked to return and save the very wolf who'd destroyed me. The irony wasn't lost on me. "When do I leave?" I asked. "Tonight," Rowena said. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her touch gentle despite her usual gruffness. "Remember your training. Remember who you are. And Rowena, don't let him diminish you. You are his equal now, mark or no mark. Don't ever forget that." I embraced the old woman who'd become like a grandmother to me, then clasped forearms with Edmund in the warrior's farewell. Then I shifted, my transformation smooth and effortless, silver fur rippling into existence as my wolf form took over. And I ran. South through the forests, retracing the path I'd walked 2 years ago as a broken, rejected she-wolf. But I was not that wolf anymore. I was something new, something powerful, something the pack and Cedric had never seen before. The moon goddess's words echoed in my mind as I ran. "You are going to return to your pack. And you will save them all, not as Luna, but as something far greater." The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten with dawn when I crossed the boundary markers into Ashford Pack territory. I was home. The village looked the same as I remembered. The same stone houses with thatched roofs, the same winding paths between buildings, the same ancient oak in the central square. But there was a tension in the air that hadn't been there before, a fear that clung to everything like morning fog. I approached in human form, wearing the simple traveling clothes Rowena had given me: leather breeches, a tunic, and a hooded cloak. The mark on my chest was hidden beneath the fabric, but I could feel it pulsing, responding to the nearness of my birth pack. It was early enough that few wolves were out, but those who were stopped and stared as I passed. They recognized me. I could see it in their eyes, the shock and confusion. Rowena, the rejected one, who they'd assumed was long dead. What was I doing here? I headed straight for the pack house, my heart pounding. I needed to see Cedric, to warn him about the coming threat. Whether he'd listen to me was another matter entirely. The guards at the pack house entrance moved to block my way. They were young, probably hadn't even been fully trained when I left. They didn't recognize me. "State your business," the taller one demanded. "I need to speak with Alpha Cedric," I said calmly. "It's urgent. The Alpha doesn't see petitioners without an appointment. Tell him Rowena is here. He'll see me." The guard's eyes widened. "Rowena? As in the Rowena?" I pulled back my hood, letting him see my face clearly. "Yes, that Rowena." He exchanged glances with his companion, then one of them hurried inside while the other stayed to watch me, his hand on his weapon. I waited patiently, sending calming thoughts to my wolf, who wanted to bristle at being treated as a threat. It took less than 5 minutes for the doors to slam open and for Cedric himself to emerge. 2 years had changed him. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, a hardness to his jaw. He looked tired, worn down by the weight of leadership. But he was still magnificent, still the Alpha whose presence commanded attention, whose amber eyes could pin you in place with a glance. Those eyes found mine, and I watched a dozen emotions flicker across his face in rapid succession. Disbelief, anger, and something else, something quickly suppressed that might have been regret. "Rowena." My name sounded strange in his mouth, rusty from disuse. You're alive." Disappointed. I couldn't help the edge in my voice. His jaw tightened. "What are you doing here? You know you're not welcome." "I'm here because you're going to be attacked," I interrupted. "There's a threat coming from the east. Creatures that are slaughtering packs wholesale. They'll reach Ashford territory within days, and you're not prepared to fight them." Cedric stared at me for a long moment, then laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "And you expect me to believe you? You who disappeared 2 years ago, who abandoned the pack." "You rejected me," I said flatly. "I didn't abandon anything. You made it clear I wasn't wanted. That doesn't change the fact that you have no authority here. No right to waltz back in and make claims about threats." "Then don't believe me," I snapped, patience fraying. "Ignore the warning. When those creatures tear through your borders and start slaughtering your people, when the pups are screaming and the blood is running in the streets, at least you'll have the satisfaction of knowing you were right and I was wrong." I turned to leave, suddenly exhausted by the hostility rolling off him. This had been a mistake. I should have known he'd never listen to me. "Wait." The word stopped me mid-step. I turned back to find Cedric looking conflicted, his hands clenched at his sides. "The eastern packs," he said slowly. "We've heard rumors of attacks, of entire villages going silent. I sent scouts 2 weeks ago to investigate. None have returned." "Because they're dead," I said bluntly. "These creatures don't leave survivors. They're twisted versions of wolves, corrupted by something dark and hungry. They're organized, intelligent, and they're moving west systematically, destroying every pack in their path." "And how exactly do you know this?" I hesitated. How much should I tell him? Would he even believe the truth? Before I could answer, I felt a shift in the air, a presence that made the mark on my chest flare with heat. I spun around just in time to see a dark shape materialize from the shadows between buildings. It was one of them. One of the corrupted wolves. It stood 7 feet tall, its body a grotesque mockery of a natural wolf. Its fur was matted and black, its eyes glowed red like coals, and its jaws dripped with saliva that hissed when it hit the ground. The stench of rot and wrongness rolled off it in waves. "Behind me!" I shouted to Cedric, positioning myself between him and the creature. The corrupted wolf snarled, the sound making several nearby windows shatter from the force of it. Then it lunged. I moved without thinking, muscle memory from 2 years of training taking over. I shifted mid-leap, my clothes shredding as silver fur exploded across my skin. My wolf form was massive, larger than any she-wolf had a right to be, large enough to match Cedric's alpha form. I met the corrupted wolf in mid-air, our bodies colliding with enough force to crack the cobblestones beneath us. Its claws raked across my shoulder, drawing blood, but I twisted and clamped my jaws on its throat, bearing down with all my enhanced strength. The creature howled, a sound that was part wolf, part something else entirely. It thrashed beneath me, trying to throw me off, but I held firm, calling on the power of the mark. Silver light blazed from my chest, spreading across my body, intensifying until I glowed like a fallen star. The corrupted wolf shrieked as the light touched it, its flesh smoking where the silver radiance made contact. I bit down harder, channeling the goddess's power through my jaws, and felt something inside the creature shatter. Not just its body, but whatever dark force animated it. The red light in its eyes flickered and died. Its body went limp beneath me, then began to dissolve, turning to black ash that scattered in a wind that hadn't been there moments before. I released my hold and stepped back, shifting to human form as the last traces of the creature disappeared. My clothes were ruined, but Rowena had taught me a trick, a minor manipulation of moonlight that wove itself into a simple covering. Not perfect, but it would do. I turned to face Cedric, who stood frozen, his expression one of absolute shock. Behind him, pack members had begun to emerge from their homes, drawn by the sounds of battle. They stared at me with a mixture of awe and fear. "That," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "is what's coming for you. Except there won't be just one. There will be hundreds, maybe thousands. And unless you have a wolf marked by the moon goddess herself who can channel her light to destroy them, your pack doesn't stand a chance." Cedric's eyes dropped to my chest, where the mark was clearly visible now, glowing bright silver against my skin. His face went pale. What are you?" he whispered. "I am what I was always meant to be," I replied. "I am Silverborn, daughter of the goddess's first line. I am chosen and marked as your equal, Alpha Cedric. And I am the only thing standing between your pack and total annihilation." The square had filled with wolves now. Dozens of them, including the pack's council of elders. I saw my mother pushing through the crowd, tears streaming down her face, my father right behind her. I saw old Edith, her clouded eyes somehow seeing more than anyone else's, a knowing smile on her ancient face. And I saw others I recognized. Bertram the Beta, looking grim and battle-ready. Young Isolde, who'd been mated to a warrior 2 years ago and now held a babe in her arms. Oswald the healer, his eyes sharp with professional interest as he assessed the wound on my shoulder that was already closing. "This is impossible," Cedric said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The silver line is a myth. A legend told to pups." "Is it?" Elder Whitmore stepped forward, the same ancient wolf who'd officiated the mating ceremony. He looked at me with something like wonder. "I've lived 97 years, and I've never seen a wolf glow with moonlight. I've never seen a she-wolf take a form as large as an alpha's. And I've certainly never seen the goddess's mark manifest on living flesh." He turned to Cedric. "Perhaps, Alpha, it's time you reconsidered what you think you know about legends." Cedric looked torn, his alpha pride warring with the evidence of his own eyes. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, see him trying to find some way to dismiss what he'd just witnessed, to maintain control of a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond his authority. We need to convene the council, he said finally, his voice tight. Now, Rowena, you will attend and explain everything. If you're truly here to help the pack, then you'll submit to questioning. I almost laughed at the word submit, as if he still had any authority over me. But I held my tongue. This wasn't about ego or pride. Lives were at stake. Fine, I said. But make it quick. Those creatures won't wait for you to finish your deliberations. They're coming, Cedric. And they're coming soon. The council chamber was a circular room in the heart of the pack house, with high windows that let in streams of morning light. A round table sat in the center, a symbol of equality among the council members, though everyone knew the Alpha's word carried the most weight. Cedric sat in his traditional seat, with Beta Bertram to his right and Elder Whitmore to his left. The other council members, 3 elders and 2 senior warriors, filled out the circle. I was given a seat directly across from Cedric, positioned like an opponent rather than an ally. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Explain, Cedric said without preamble once everyone was settled. Everything. How you survived, where you've been, what you are, and how you know about these creatures. I took a breath and began. I told them about wandering the forest after the rejection, about collapsing beneath the oak tree, about the moon goddess appearing to me in physical form. I told them about the mark, about learning of my heritage as the last daughter of the silver line. I described my training with Rowena and Edmund, the gifts I'd developed, the prophecy about darkness coming from the east. As I spoke, I watched their faces. Elder Whitmore listened with rapt attention, his expression growing more excited with each revelation. The warriors looked skeptical but interested. The other elders ranged from dismissive to cautiously open-minded. And Cedric's face was an unreadable mask, but I could feel the turmoil beneath. The mate bond might have been severed, but some residual connection remained, a faint awareness of his emotions that I couldn't quite shake. He was afraid, not of the creatures, but of what my return meant for his authority. Let me understand this correctly, Cedric said when I finished. You expect us to believe that the moon goddess herself appeared to you, marked you as some sort of chosen champion, and sent you back here to save us all? His tone was dripping with skepticism. I don't expect you to believe anything, I replied calmly. I'm telling you what happened. Believe it or don't, the creatures will come regardless. She destroyed one of them right in front of us, Alpha, Bertram interjected, his gruff voice thoughtful. I've never seen anything like it. The thing was monstrous, and she killed it with moonlight alone. Tricks, one of the other elders muttered. Could be any number of explanations. Then explain this. I stood and pulled aside my tunic enough to reveal the mark fully. It pulsed with steady light, casting silver shadows across the council chamber. Explain how a common blacksmith's daughter suddenly carries a mark that matches descriptions from the oldest texts. Explain how I can do this. I held out my hand and called on the power. Moonlight condensed in my palm, forming a sphere of pure silver radiance that illuminated the entire chamber. Gasps echoed around the table. Or this. I projected my consciousness outward, a gift Rowena had taught me. Suddenly I could see through the eyes of every wolf in the packhouse simultaneously. A dizzying, overwhelming perspective that showed me 36 viewpoints at once. I held it for just a moment, then snapped back to myself. I know that Oswald the healer is sneaking chamomile tea against his own medical advice because his joints ache, I said, my voice taking on an otherworldly quality as I spoke things I shouldn't know. I know that Isolde's babe is sick with a fever she hasn't told anyone about yet because she fears looking like an incompetent mother. I know that Bertram dreams of his dead mate every night and wakes crying. I know that you, Cedric, haven't slept properly in weeks because you're terrified you're leading the pack to destruction and you don't know how to stop it. Cedric shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against stone. That's enough. Is it? I met his glare steadily. Because I can keep going. I can tell this council about the doubts you've hidden, about how you questioned your decision to reject me within hours of making it, about how you've spent 2 years wondering if you made a mistake. I said that's enough. His alpha command rolled through the room, a pressure designed to force submission from any wolf of lower rank. It washed over me like water. I smiled, letting him see that his power had no effect on me. I'm not pack anymore, Cedric. Your commands mean nothing to me. The goddess's mark makes me your equal in all ways. You cannot compel me, cannot command me, cannot force me to submit. I leaned forward, hands flat on the table. The only reason I'm here is because despite everything you did to me, despite the pain you caused, I won't stand by and let innocent wolves die when I have the power to prevent it. Silence filled the chamber. Every wolf stared at me with varying degrees of shock. An alpha being defied so openly, so completely, was virtually unheard of. Elder Whitmore cleared his throat. Perhaps, he said carefully, we should focus on the practical matter at hand. Rowena, or should I say Silver Daughter, you claim these creatures will attack soon. How soon? And what can we do to prepare? I tore my gaze away from Cedric and addressed the elder. Based on the pattern of attacks, I'd estimate 3 days at most. Maybe less, they're accelerating their advance. As for preparation, paused considering. Traditional defenses won't work. These things are stronger than normal wolves, faster, and they feel no fear or pain. They'll tear through your warriors like parchment. Then how do we fight them? Bertram demanded. With me, I said simply. The goddess's light is the only thing that can destroy them permanently. I can kill them but not hundreds at once. We need to funnel them, create choke points where I can face them in smaller numbers. And we need to evacuate the vulnerable. Pups, elders who can't fight, nursing mothers. Get them to the deep shelters. You're talking about a siege, one of the warriors said. Our pack hasn't faced a siege in 50 years. Then you'd better remember quickly how it's done. Cedric had remained standing, his hands clenched on the back of his chair. And what do you want in return for this help? He asked, suspicion heavy in his voice. What's your price? I met his eyes, letting him see the depth of my sincerity. I want nothing from you, Cedric. No apology, no recognition, no place in your pack. When this is over, I'll leave and you'll never see me again. But until then, you're going to listen to me, you're going to follow my tactical guidance, and you're going to put aside your pride long enough to let me save lives. Can you do that? The muscle in his jaw jumped. For a long moment, I thought he might refuse out of sheer stubbornness. But then Bertram leaned over and whispered something urgent in his ear, and Cedric's shoulders sagged slightly. Fine, he bit out. You'll work with Bertram to coordinate defenses. But you follow pack law while you're here, and you stay away from me unless absolutely necessary. Understood. Perfectly, I said, matching his cold tone. Then this council is adjourned. Bertram, gather the warriors. We have 3 days to prepare for war. The next 3 days passed in a blur of frantic activity. I worked with Bertram and the senior warriors to transform the village into a fortress, using every defensive trick Edmund had taught me. We collapsed the main roads into the village, creating rubble barriers that would force attackers into narrow kill zones. We stockpiled weapons. Not that they'd do much good against the corrupted wolves, but they made the pack warriors feel better. We organized evacuation procedures, drilling the non-combatants until they could reach the deep shelters in under 3 minutes. And I trained a select group of warriors in the basics of fighting alongside someone who wielded magic. Your job isn't to kill these things, I told the 24 wolves Bertram had chosen as my support unit. Your job is to keep them off me long enough for me to channel the goddess's light. Distract them, harry them, but don't engage directly unless you have no choice. They're stronger than you, and they will kill you if you give them an opening. Among those warriors was a young male named Aldwin, perhaps 20 years old, with eager eyes and natural talent. He reminded me of myself before the rejection, full of potential but uncertain of his place. Is it true you were rejected by the Alpha? He asked me one evening as we reinforced the eastern barricade. Paused in my work. Yes. But you came back anyway. To help him. Help us. He shook his head in wonder. I don't know if I could do that. Come back to protect people who cast me aside. I'm not doing this for Cedric, I said, driving another sharpened stake into the ground. I'm doing it because it's right. Because innocent wolves don't deserve to die for their alpha's mistakes. And because the goddess asked me to. What's she like? Aldwin asked. The goddess. I smiled, remembering that luminous presence, that feeling of absolute love and terrible power combined. She's everything. Fierce and gentle, ancient and young. Looking at her is like staring into the sun and the moon at the same time. And she cares, Aldwin. She cares so much about us, about all wolves, that it almost hurts to feel it. I wish I could meet her. Maybe you will, I said. If we survive this. I saw my parents briefly. A tearful reunion where my mother held me like she'd never let go and my father kept touching my face as if to confirm I was real. They'd aged in the 2 years I'd been gone. New lines etched around their eyes, new gray in their hair. We thought you were dead, my mother sobbed. We mourned you, held a memorial service. And all this time. I'm sorry, I whispered, holding them both. I couldn't come back. Not until I was strong enough. Not until I was ready. You're so different, my father said, studying me with his blacksmith's eye for detail. Not just the mark, but everything about you. You hold yourself like a warrior now. Like nobility. I'm still your daughter, I assured him. That hasn't changed. But we both knew it was a lie. Everything had changed. Old Edith sought me out on the second day, finding me atop the eastern watchtower where I was surveying the forest line for signs of attack. I knew, she said without preamble, settling her ancient bones onto the bench beside me. The moment you were born, I knew you were different. Your mother's labor was touched by moonlight. Literally. Silver radiance poured through the window and bathed you as you entered the world. I told your parents it was a sign, but they dismissed it as the ramblings of a foolish old woman. Why didn't you tell me? Asked. Would you have believed me? A girl of common birth, told she was marked by the goddess before she could even speak. Edith shook her head. No, child. You had to discover it yourself, had to be broken and remade. That's how the greatest wolves are forged, in the fires of suffering. I don't feel great, I admitted. I feel terrified. What if I fail? What if I'm not strong enough, not fast enough? What if wolves die because I couldn't protect them? Edith's weathered hand found mine. Then they die. And you carry that weight and you keep fighting anyway. That's what it means to be a leader, Rowena. Not being perfect. Being willing to try even when failure might destroy you. I squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her calm certainty. On the third day, just as the sun was setting, I felt it. A wrongness spreading through the forest like poison. The corrupted wolves were coming. I stood on the eastern barricade, Bertram beside me, and watched as the tree line erupted with movement. They poured out of the forest like a dark tide. Dozens, no hundreds of those twisted, corrupted forms, their red eyes glowing in the gathering darkness, their howls raising every hair on my body. Goddess preserve us, Bertram breathed. There's so many. Get to your positions, I ordered, my voice carrying across the barricade. Remember your training. Protect the choke points. Keep them funneled. And whatever happens, don't break formation. Warriors scrambled to their assigned posts. Archers readied their bows, though arrows would do little against these creatures. Mothers gathered pups and hurried toward the shelters. And Cedric climbed the barricade to stand on my other side. His alpha form magnificent and terrible. His amber eyes locked on the approaching horde. I never should have rejected you, he said quietly, so only I could hear. I know that doesn't mean anything now. I know I destroyed any chance we might have had. But I need you to know I was wrong. About everything. I didn't look at him. Couldn't look at him. Save it for after, I said. If we survive, we can talk. If we don't, it won't matter anyway. The corrupted wolves hit the outer barriers with the force of an avalanche. And the battle began. The first wave crashed against our defenses like a black tsunami, and the night exploded into chaos and screaming. The corrupted wolves were nightmares made flesh, each one twisted and wrong, their bodies too large, their jaws too wide, their movements jerky and unnatural like puppets controlled by an inexperienced hand. They climbed over the rubble barriers we'd built, their claws finding purchase on stone and wood, their red eyes fixed on the living wolves beyond with single-minded hunger. I stood at the primary choke point, a narrow gap we'd deliberately left in the barricades, designed to funnel attackers into a killing field. The mark on my chest blazed like a star, silver light pouring from it in waves that pushed back the darkness. The first corrupted wolf to reach me was massive, easily twice the size of a normal alpha. It leaped the final barrier with a roar that shook the ground, jaws open wide enough to swallow me whole. I didn't flinch. I raised my hand and channeled the goddess's power through it, condensing moonlight into a spear of pure radiance. The spear shot forward and punched through the creature's chest, detonating with enough force to blow it apart from the inside. Black ash rained down, already dissipating before it hit the ground. But there was no time to celebrate. 5 more were already rushing the gap. I shifted, my transformation instantaneous, and met them in my silver wolf form. My jaws closed on the first one's throat, flooding it with moonlight until it dissolved. My claws raked across the second's face, each strike burning with holy fire. The third tried to circle behind me, but I spun and caught it with my tail. Enhanced with the goddess's power, the blow hit like a battering ram and sent the creature flying backward into 2 others. Behind me, I heard the sounds of battle spreading across the other defensive positions. Warriors howled as they engaged the corrupted wolves that had found other ways through our barriers. Archers loosed arrows that did little more than annoy their targets. Somewhere a pup was screaming. Focus, I told myself. You can't save everyone. Focus on your sector. 2 more corrupted wolves rushed me simultaneously, trying to overwhelm me with coordinated attacks. I leaped straight up, using a technique Rowena had drilled into me 10,000 times, and twisted in mid-air. I landed on one's back and drove silver light down through its spine, killing it instantly, then used its dissolving body as a springboard to launch myself at the other. The battle became a rhythm: strike, kill, dodge, strike again. My body moved on pure instinct, every lesson from my training manifesting in split-second decisions. The mark on my chest pulsed like a second heart, feeding me power in an endless stream. But even with the goddess's gifts, I was just one wolf, and they kept coming. Fall back to secondary positions. I heard Bertram roar from somewhere to my left. His section had been overrun. I could see warriors retreating in organized chaos, carrying wounded with them, trying to maintain formation even as corrupted wolves snapped at their heels. I wanted to help them, but I couldn't abandon my position. If I left this choke point undefended, the entire eastern barricade would collapse. Then I saw Aldwin, young, eager Aldwin who'd asked me about the goddess. He was separated from his unit, surrounded by 3 of the corrupted wolves, fighting desperately but clearly losing. I watched in horror as one of them clamped its jaws on his shoulder and began to drag him down.
Whoa.
I called on the power differently this time, remembering something Rowena had shown me but I'd never successfully pulled off. I focused on the mark, on the connection to the goddess it represented, and pulled. Moonlight erupted from my body in a wave, a pulse of pure, cleansing radiance that expanded outward in a perfect circle. It washed over Aldwin and the corrupted wolves attacking him, and the effect was instantaneous. The creatures shrieked as the light touched them, their corrupted flesh smoking and burning. Within seconds, all 3 had dissolved into ash. Aldwin staggered to his feet, blood streaming from his shoulder but alive. His eyes wide with shock and gratitude. "Get to the healer," I commanded, then had to turn immediately as more corrupted wolves poured through my gap. The battle raged for hours. My muscles screamed, my lungs burned, exhaustion clawed at the edges of my mind. I lost track of how many corrupted wolves I killed. 50. 100. They blurred together into an endless tide of teeth and claws and red eyes. But slowly, gradually, the tide began to turn. My warriors, Because I'd begun to think of them as mine during those desperate hours, adapted to the threat. They learned to work in pairs, one distracting while the other went for hamstrings or eyes. They learned to recognize when a corrupted wolf was about to leap and how to dodge. They learned to trust that I would be there, that my light would protect them when they needed it most. And Cedric fought like the alpha he was meant to be. I caught glimpses of him throughout the battle. His golden form streaked with black ichor from the corrupted wolves, his jaws clamping down on throats, his claws rending flesh. He couldn't destroy them permanently like I could, but he kept them off the weaker warriors, absorbed attacks meant for others, led by example through sheer, bloody determination. For a moment, just a brief, fleeting moment, I saw what we could have been together. Alpha and Silver Daughter, masculine and feminine power balanced. Two halves of a whole leading the pack to greatness. Then the moment passed, swallowed by necessity and violence. The sky was just beginning to lighten with pre-dawn gray when the last corrupted wolf fell, dissolving into ash under my jaws. I stood in the center of the killing field, my silver fur matted with blood and gore, my sides heaving, every muscle trembling with exhaustion. Silence fell, the eerie, profound silence that comes after battle, when your ears are still ringing with combat sounds that are no longer there. Then a howl rose from the barricade, Bertram's voice, raw with triumph and grief combined. Other howls joined his, until the entire pack was singing victory into the dawn. We'd won. We'd survived. I shifted back to human form and collapsed to my knees, too drained to stand. The mark on my chest still glowed, but dimly now, its power nearly exhausted. Around me, the evidence of battle lay everywhere. Scorch marks where my light had struck, blood staining the cobblestones, discarded weapons, and the worst sight of all, 3 bodies laid out carefully, warriors who hadn't made it. 3. Only 3 dead, out of a pack of 300 facing an army of corrupted wolves. It was a miracle. No, not a miracle. It was the result of preparation, of strategy, of warriors who trusted me enough to follow my instructions even when every instinct screamed to run. Hands touched my shoulders. My mother, appearing from wherever she'd sheltered during the battle, wrapping a cloak around my nakedness. "Come, sweetheart. Let's get you to the healer. The wounded," I started to protest, "are being cared for. Let someone care for you for once." She helped me to my feet, and together we walked through a village transformed. Wolves lined the path, and as I passed, they did something that shocked me to my core. They bowed. Not the full submission bow given to an alpha, but the respectful bow given to a hero, to someone who'd earned honor through deed rather than birth. Warriors pressed fists to their hearts in salute. Elders nodded with approval. Pups too young to understand what had happened simply stared at the glowing mark on my chest with wonder. And at the healer's station, standing in the doorway, Cedric waited. Oswald the healer fussed over me for an hour, treating cuts and bruises I hadn't even noticed receiving, forcing me to drink a bitter tonic that would help replenish my strength. My mother stayed by my side the entire time, holding my hand, occasionally reaching up to touch my face as if still confirming I was real. When Oswald finally declared me treated and stable, "Though you should rest for 3 days minimum," he added sternly, my mother reluctantly left to check on my father, who'd taken a minor wound defending the western barricade, which left me alone with Cedric, who'd been waiting silently in the corner the entire time. "We need to talk," he said. I was too tired to argue. "Fine. Talk." He ran a hand through his golden hair, a gesture of frustration I remembered from before. "What you did tonight. Rowena, you saved us. Without you, the pack would have been slaughtered. I know that. Every wolf here knows that. Is there a point to this?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "The point is that I was wrong," he said, moving closer. "About you, about the rejection, about everything. I let fear and pride blind me to what was right in front of me. You were always meant to be extraordinary. I was just too foolish to see it. So you've said. I want to fix it," he continued, desperation creeping into his voice. "The rejection, there are rituals, old rituals that can reverse the bond severance. We could try again, Rowena. You could be Luna like you were always meant to be. Stop. I held up a hand, fury rising in my chest. Just stop. Cedric fell silent, watching me warily. You think this is about being Luna? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. You think I spent 2 years training, growing stronger, becoming something new, all so I could come back here and be your mate? I thought. You thought wrong, I cut him off. I'm not that girl anymore, Cedric. The Rowena you rejected, the blacksmith's daughter who would have been thrilled to stand beside you as Luna. She died in that forest 2 years ago. The goddess burned her away and remade me into something you can't control, can't command, can't possess. I stood, moving to the window where dawn light was streaming in. The village beyond was battered but standing, wolves moving through the streets already beginning repairs, already returning to life. I don't need you to fix anything, I continued. The rejection was the best thing you ever could have done for me. It freed me to become who I was always meant to be. Not someone's mate, not someone's Luna, but the goddess's chosen, a force in my own right. Then what do you want? Cedric asked, and I heard genuine confusion in his voice. If not to be Luna, if not to be my mate, then what? I turned to face him, letting him see the resolve in my eyes. I want you to understand that you don't get to reject me when I'm inconvenient and then reclaim me when I prove useful. I want you to recognize that I am your equal, not because you acknowledge it but because the goddess made it so. And I want you to learn from this, Cedric. Learn that strength comes in forms you might not recognize, that power isn't always about dominance, that the wolves you overlook might be the very ones you need most. He stared at me for a long moment, emotions warring across his face. And if I do learn those lessons, if I become better, would you ever consider? No, I said gently but firmly. The mate bond was severed, Cedric. Even if rituals could restore it technically, the damage runs deeper than magic can fix. You broke something in me when you rejected me, and while I've healed into a different shape. A shape that doesn't fit beside you anymore. Pain flashed across his face. Real, genuine pain. But let him feel a fraction of what he put me through. For what it's worth, he said quietly. I am sorry. Truly. And I will be better. If not for you, then for the next wolf who needs an alpha to see their worth. He nodded. That's all I can ask. He moved toward the door then paused. Will you stay? At least for a while. The pack could use your guidance as we rebuild. And there might be more attacks. There will be more attacks, I confirmed. This was just the first wave. The corruption is spreading from somewhere. And until we find and destroy the source, it will keep coming. Then we need you. Considered. Part of me wanted to leave immediately, to shake the dust of Ashford Pack from my feet and never look back. But Morwena's voice echoed in my mind. You will save them all, not as Luna, but as something far greater. My work here wasn't finished. I'll stay, I said. But not as Pack. I'll stay as an independent ally, working with you but not under you. And when the corruption is defeated, I leave. No arguments, no attempts to convince me otherwise. Agreed. Cedric nodded slowly. Agreed. He left, and I was alone with my thoughts and the golden light of morning. Over the following weeks, an uneasy routine developed. I lived in a small cottage on the edge of the village. Not my parents' home, which would have felt like regressing, but a place of my own that the pack provided. I trained warriors in defensive techniques, worked with Bertram to improve our fortifications, and spent long hours meditating, trying to connect with the goddess to understand more about the corruption's source. True to his word, Cedric gave me space and autonomy. He consulted with me on pack matters but never commanded. He respected my boundaries even when I could see it pained him. He was trying, genuinely trying to be better. It didn't change anything between us, but I respected the effort. The corruption struck twice more. Smaller attacks that we repelled with relative ease now that the pack knew what to expect. But each time I felt the wrongness at the attack's core more clearly, like tracing a thread back to its source. Something was creating these creatures. Something intelligent and malevolent was deliberately corrupting wolves and sending them to destroy packs. But what? And why? The answer came on a cold autumn night, during meditation. I sat in the small grove behind my cottage, the mark on my chest glowing softly in the moonlight. I'd learned to use the mark as a focus, to project my consciousness outward and see things hidden from normal sight. Tonight I pushed farther than I ever had before. My awareness spread across the village, beyond the packlands, into the wild forests to the east. I followed the trail of corruption like a hunter following spoor, tracing it back through miles of wilderness, past destroyed pack territories, past places where the very land seemed sick and dying. And finally I found the source. Deep in the eastern mountains, in a cavern that plunged into the earth's heart, something ancient stirred. I saw it with my mind's eye. A presence of pure malevolence, something that had been imprisoned there since the first days but was now waking, clawing its way back to power. It had a name, this thing. A name whispered in the oldest legends, dismissed as myth even by wolves who believed in the goddess. Fenris. The first wolf, the original predator. The creature the goddess had fought and bound at the world's beginning because its hunger was insatiable, its rage unquenchable. It had been locked away, meant to sleep until the end of days. But something had weakened its bonds. And now it was waking, and its corruption was spreading, transforming normal wolves into twisted extensions of itself. I gasped and snapped back to my body, my heart racing. This was so much worse than I'd imagined. We weren't facing an enemy we could simply defeat through force of arms. We were facing a primal force of nature, a being that existed to consume and destroy. How could I possibly fight something like that? The same way you fought everything else, my wolf said, speaking clearly in my mind for the first time since the rejection. With courage, with intelligence, and with the goddess's light. You are her champion, Rowena. This is why she chose you. I needed to tell Cedric. Needed to warn him that the corruption would continue, would intensify, until Fenris either broke free completely or was somehow bound again. I found him in his study, poring over maps and reports by candlelight. He looked up when I entered, and I saw the shadows under his eyes, the lines of stress carved into his face. Leading a pack under constant threat was taking its toll. We need to talk, I said. I know what's causing the corruption. I told him everything. About Fenris, about the weakening bonds, about the ancient prison in the eastern mountains. I watched his face grow progressively paler as the implications sank in. If this Fenris breaks free, he began. It will consume everything, I finished. Every pack, every wolf, every living thing in its path. It exists only to hunger, only to destroy. The goddess bound it away because nothing else could stop it. Then how do we fight it? I shook my head. I don't know. But I know who might. Rowena, my teacher. If anyone has knowledge of how the goddess bound Fenris originally, it would be her. I need to return to her valley, consult the old texts, learn if there's a way to reinforce the bonds or... I hesitated. Or destroy Fenris permanently. Cedric stood, moving around his desk. How long would you be gone? A week, maybe 2. The journey alone takes 4 days each way. The pack can't afford to lose you for that long, he said, but there was no command in his voice, just worry. If the corrupted wolves attack while you're gone, then you'll fight them the best you can, I said firmly. Cedric, listen to me. The attacks will only get worse as Fenris grows stronger. If we don't find a way to stop it at the source, you could have me here every single day and it won't matter. We'll be overwhelmed eventually. He knew I was right. I could see it in his eyes, even as he hated admitting it. Take Bertram with you, he said finally. And a squad of our best warriors. I won't have you traveling alone through territory this dangerous. I started to argue I could move faster alone but stopped. This was his way of showing he cared without overstepping boundaries. And truthfully, having backup wouldn't be the worst idea. All right, I agreed. But they follow my lead on the road. No arguments, no pack hierarchy. In the wild, my word is law. Agreed. He moved closer, and for a moment I thought he might reach for me. But he caught himself, hands clenching at his sides. "Come back, Rowena. Please. Whatever else stands between us, I need you to know that you matter to this pack. To me. I'll come back, I promised. I'm not done here yet." We left at dawn. Myself, Bertram, and 4 warriors including young Aldwin, whose shoulder had healed but who now carried a nasty scar as a reminder of how close he'd come to death. He'd requested specifically to join my guard, and I'd agreed. The boy had earned it. The journey north was tense. We moved through forests that showed signs of corruption spread, trees with blackened bark, streams that ran dark and foul, the occasional corrupted animal that we had to put down. The wrongness in the land was growing, spreading like infection from a festering wound. On the 3rd night we were attacked. Not by corrupted wolves this time, but by a pack of rogues. Desperate, half-starved wolves who saw our supplies and decided to take their chances. There were a dozen of them, led by a grizzled male with more scars than sense. "Just give us the food and we'll let you pass," he growled, his pack fanning out to surround us. "Leave now and I won't kill you," I replied calmly, stepping forward so they could see the mark glowing on my chest. "I am Silverborn, chosen by the goddess herself. You do not want this fight." The rogue leader laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Silverborn. That's just a myth told to." He stopped mid-sentence as I let power flare, moonlight erupting around me in a visible aura. My eyes glowed silver, my form seemed to grow larger, more imposing, and the very air around me crackled with divine energy. Several of the rogues immediately dropped to their bellies in submission. The others hesitated, torn between hunger and self-preservation. "Last chance," I said, my voice carrying an otherworldly echo. "Leave or face the goddess's wrath." The rogue leader looked at his pack, saw that most had already submitted, and finally, blessedly, showed some sense. He lowered his head and began backing away. "We meant no disrespect," he muttered. We're just trying to survive. The corruption destroyed our territory 3 weeks ago. We've been running ever since." My anger faded, replaced by pity. These weren't villains, just desperate wolves displaced by the very threat I was trying to stop. "How many in your pack?" "Yes. 23. Mostly pups and elders. They're hidden 2 miles west." I looked at Bertram, who nodded slightly. "We could spare some supplies." "Go to Ashford Pack territory," I told the rogue leader. "Tell Alpha Cedric that Rowena sent you, that you're refugees from the corruption. He'll give you shelter and food while you recover." The rogue's eyes widened. You'd help us? After we tried to rob you?" "I'd help any wolf trying to survive in these dark times," I said. "But if you betray this mercy, if you harm anyone in Ashford territory, I will hunt you down myself, and the goddess's light will be the last thing you see." "Understood. Understood. Thank you, Silver Daughter." "Thank you." The rogues retreated, and we continued north. Aldwin looked at me with something like awe. "You just gave away 1/3 of our supplies," he said. "Yes. And sent them to the pack, where they'll need to be fed and sheltered." "Yes. Alpha Cedric is going to be furious." I smiled slightly. "Probably. But it was the right thing to do. And maybe, just maybe, Cedric will learn that strength isn't just about defending your own pack. It's about helping those who can't help themselves. The goddess teaches compassion, Aldwin. Never forget that." We reached Rowena's valley on the 4th evening, just as the sun was setting. My traveling companions gasped as we crested the ridge and saw it, that impossible beautiful place that existed slightly outside normal reality, where the air shimmered with old magic and the very stones hummed with power. Rowena was waiting at her cottage door, as if she'd known exactly when we'd arrive. She probably had. "So," she said, her eyes bright as they took in my companions, "you've brought friends this time. But they can make themselves useful while we work." Over the next week, Rowena and I pored over ancient texts, some written in languages that predated the modern packs by thousands of years. We studied the story of Fenris, how it had been the first wolf the goddess created, meant to be her companion and champion. But something had gone wrong in its creation. It was born with an insatiable hunger, a rage that couldn't be quenched, a desire to consume that overrode everything else. The goddess had tried to tame it, to teach it balance and restraint. But Fenris was beyond teaching. It killed and devoured everything it encountered, growing stronger with each meal, until finally the goddess realized she had no choice. She couldn't kill it. Fenris was too much a part of the world's fundamental nature, too woven into the fabric of reality. Destroying it would have unraveled creation itself. So instead she bound it. She'd fought Fenris for 7 days and 7 nights, their battle reshaping mountains and creating the great rifts that became the eastern canyons. Finally, she'd managed to wrap Fenris in chains forged from moonlight itself, bound with words of power that had never been spoken before or since, and locked it away in a prison deep beneath the earth. The bonds were meant to last forever. But nothing lasts forever. "The chains are weakening," Rowena said, her finger tracing lines in a text so old the parchment crumbled at her touch. "Something has been working at them for centuries, maybe Fenris itself, slowly, patiently gnawing at its bonds. Or maybe time alone has worn them thin. Either way, they're failing. How long before it breaks free completely?" "Yes. Months. Maybe less. And as the bonds weaken, its corruption spreads further. Soon it won't just be wolves being transformed. The land itself will begin to change, to reflect Fenris's hunger. Plants will wither, water will spoil, and eventually—" She looked at me with grave eyes. "Eventually, all life in the eastern territories will die. Then we need to reinforce the bonds," I said. "The goddess did it once. Surely there's a way to do it again." Rowena was quiet for a long moment. "There is a way," she said finally. "But you won't like it." She pulled out another text, this one written in the old tongue, and translated as she read. "The bonds that hold the first wolf can only be forged by one who carries the moon's own light. A champion must descend to the prison, must face Fenris directly, and must bind it anew with words of power and will of iron. But the binding requires sacrifice." My blood ran cold. "What kind of sacrifice?" "The one who binds Fenris must remain there," Rowena said softly. "Chained to the prison itself, their own life force feeding the bonds, keeping them strong. A living warden, Rowena. A guardian who must stay in that darkness forever, ensuring Fenris never escapes." The words hit me like a physical blow. Forever. Alone in the dark, chained to a monster, keeping it contained through sheer force of will for the rest of my unnaturally long life. Because the goddess's mark would extend that life, would keep me alive for centuries, maybe millennia, all of it spent in that prison. "There has to be another way," I said desperately. "Something else we can try. I've searched every text, every scroll, every fragment of ancient knowledge I possess," Rowena said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "This is the only way. The goddess herself couldn't find a better solution. If one existed, she would have used it." I stood and paced the cottage, my mind racing. This couldn't be right. The goddess wouldn't have chosen me, marked me, given me all this power and training and purpose, just to lock me away in darkness forever. Would she? "Sometimes the greatest love is the greatest sacrifice," a voice whispered in my mind. Not my wolf, but something else. Something older and infinitely sad. The goddess herself, speaking from whatever realm she inhabited. "You asked me what you were supposed to do, daughter. This is what I need from you. Not because I'm cruel, not because I don't love you, but because you are the only one strong enough to do it. The only one who could survive it and remain sane. The only one whose will is iron enough to hold for centuries. Please." Tears streamed down my face. "It's not fair," I whispered. "No," the goddess agreed. "It's not. But since when has fairness had anything to do with necessity?" Bertram found me hours later, sitting by the lake, staring at the moonlight on water. He settled beside me silently, waiting. "Did Rowena tell you?" "Yes. She told us," he confirmed. "About the binding. About what it would cost." "I don't want to do it," I admitted. Goddess help me, I don't want to be trapped in darkness forever. I've only just found myself, found my strength, discovered what I could be. And now I have to give all of that up. It feels like the cruelest joke in creation. Then don't, Bertram said simply. Let someone else do it. It doesn't have to be you. Yes, it does, I said, and knew it was true. The mark, the training, everything that's happened, it's all been leading to this. The goddess chose me for this. And if I don't do it, Fenris will break free and everything. Every pack, every wolf, every living thing will be consumed. How could I live with myself, knowing I could have prevented that but chose not to because I wanted to live my own life? That's not fair to you. Life rarely is. I looked at him, this gruff warrior who'd become something like a friend. Will you do something for me? Anything. When we go back to Ashford territory. Don't tell them. Don't tell Cedric, don't tell the pack. Let me do this quietly, without fanfare or attempts to talk me out of it. I'm not strong enough to withstand that. Bertram was silent for a long time. Finally he nodded. If that's what you want. It is. We sat together as the moon tracked across the sky, and I memorized the feeling of peace, of beauty, of freedom. Because soon, too soon, I would have none of those things ever again. We returned to Ashford territory with heavy hearts and the knowledge of what had to be done. I spent 3 days putting my affairs in order, though I couldn't tell anyone why. I spent an evening with my parents, memorizing their faces, listening to my father's stories about the forge, watching my mother tend her herb garden. I hugged them both tight when I left, and didn't let myself cry until I was out of sight. I sparred with Aldwin and the other warriors I'd trained, passing on every technique I could think of, every lesson that might help them survive the battles to come. I walked through the village one last time, seeing it through new eyes. The children playing in the square, the merchants haggling good-naturedly, the wolves going about their lives in peace and safety because someone was willing to sacrifice for them. Worth it, I told myself. Has to be worth it. On the 3rd night I went to Cedric's study. He looked up when I entered, and immediately knew something was wrong. What is it? He asked, standing. What did you learn from Rowena? Told him. Everything. About Fenris, about the failing bonds, about the only way to stop it. I watched his face cycle through disbelief, horror, denial, and finally terrible understanding. No, he said flatly. Absolutely not. There has to be another way. There isn't. Then we'll find one. We'll research more, consult other elders, try. Cedric. I spoke his name gently, and he stopped. We don't have time. Fenris grows stronger every day. In weeks, maybe sooner, it will break free. This is the only way. I won't let you do this, he said, and there was desperation in his voice. You can't ask me to let you walk into darkness forever. Rowena, I already destroyed you once. I can't, I won't do it again. You're not destroying me, I said. I'm choosing this. Me. Not because you're commanding it, not because anyone forced me, but because it's right. Because saving lives is worth any price. He moved toward me, and this time he did reach out, his hands cupping my face with devastating gentleness. I love you, he said, the words raw and honest. I know I have no right, I know I forfeited any claim when I rejected you, but I need you to know. I love you, Rowena. And the thought of you suffering for centuries in that darkness. It's killing me. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I know, I whispered. But love isn't always about being together. Sometimes it's about letting go. Sometimes it's about accepting that the person you love has to do something impossibly hard, and all you can do is honor their choice. This isn't fair, he said, echoing my words to the goddess. No, I agreed. It's not. He pulled me close, and I let him hold me. One last moment of warmth, of connection, of what might have been if the world had been kinder. I felt the ghost of the mate bond that had once connected us, felt the love he claimed to have for me, felt his grief as if it were my own. When? He asked against my hair. Tomorrow. Dawn. Rowena and Edmund will guide me to the prison entrance. And then? I pulled back to look him in the eyes. Then I go alone. That part no one can do with me. Let me come with you, he pleaded. At least to the entrance. Let me be there. I almost refused. Having him there would make it harder, would make me want to turn back. But I saw the need in his face, the need to do something, anything, to be part of this, even if only as a witness. All right, I said. You can come. That night I didn't sleep. I stood in my cottage and watched the moon travel across the sky one last time as a free wolf. I felt the mark on my chest pulse with warmth, with power, with the goddess's presence. Thank you, she whispered in my mind. Thank you, my brave daughter. Know that you will never be forgotten. Know that your sacrifice will be honored in songs and stories for as long as wolves draw breath. Know that I love you and that you are the finest champion I have ever chosen. Will it hurt? I asked her. Being bound there, will it hurt? First, she admitted. But I will be with you. Always. In that darkness you will carry my light. And Rowena. Time passes differently in that place. Centuries will feel like moments. You won't suffer as you fear. I promise you that, Mercy. It wasn't much comfort, but it was something. Dawn came too quickly. A small group gathered at the edge of the village. Cedric, Bertram, Aldwin, Rowena, Edmund, my parents. I'd asked them not to come, but of course they had anyway. How could they not? My mother sobbed openly as she embraced me. My father pressed something into my hand. A small iron wolf he'd forged, smooth and perfect. So you'll have something to remind you of home, he said, his voice breaking. Aldwin tried to speak but couldn't, simply pressing his fist to his heart in warrior salute. Bertram gripped my shoulder. It's been an honor, he said gruffly. And Cedric? Cedric just looked at me with eyes full of grief and love and respect. Let's go, I said before I could lose my nerve. The journey to the eastern mountains took 2 days. We moved in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The corruption was visible everywhere now. The land itself was dying, trees twisted and black, the ground cracked and barren. We were close to Fenris's prison. On the evening of the second day we found it. A massive crevasse in the earth, easily 100 feet across, descending into darkness so absolute it seemed to swallow light. Cold air rose from the depths, carrying the stench of rot and ancient malice. The entrance, Rowena said unnecessarily. I approached the edge and looked down. I couldn't see the bottom, just endless black, and somewhere far below, I felt Fenris's presence. Felt its hunger, its rage, its desperate, clawing need to be free. The bonds are almost broken, I said, seeing with my mind's eye the chains of moonlight that wrapped around the creature. They were frayed, some links already shattered, others hanging by threads. If I'd waited even another week, it would have been too late. I turned to face those who'd come with me. This is where I go alone. How will you even descend? Cedric asked. It's too far to climb. I smiled slightly and called on the mark's power. Moonlight condensed beneath my feet, forming a path. A staircase of solid light that spiraled down into the darkness. The goddess provides, I said. I embraced each of them one final time. Saved Cedric for last. Rule well, I told him. Be the alpha you were meant to be. Protect the weak, honor the old ways. And remember that strength without compassion is just cruelty wearing a crown. I will, he promised. And Rowena, I'll make sure you're remembered. Not as the wolf I rejected, but as the hero who saved us all. That's all I can ask. I kissed his cheek gently, then turned and began my descent. The staircase of moonlight held firm beneath my feet as I walked down, down, down into the earth's heart. The light from above faded quickly, leaving me in darkness lit only by the silver glow of my own mark. The walls of the crevasse were slick with moisture, carved with ancient runes that pulsed with fading power. The goddess's original binding, worn thin by time and Fenris's relentless assault. I walked for what felt like hours, though it might have been minutes. Time felt strange here, elastic and unreliable. Finally, the crevasse opened into a vast cavern, easily a mile across. And there, in the center, I saw it. Fenris, It was enormous. Larger than any building, larger than anything that should be able to exist. Its form was wolf-like but wrong, twisted, covered in matted black fur through which red light pulsed like infected veins. Its eyes were burning coals that fixed on me the moment I entered the cavern, and its hunger was a physical force that pressed against my mind. The chains that bound it were visible now. Massive links of pure moonlight, wrapped around its body, anchored to the cavern walls. But half of them were broken, and the others were fraying before my eyes. Little wolf, Fenris's voice boomed in my head, not in words but in raw concepts and emotions. You come to bind me again. How sweet. Oh feudal. I am silver-born, I called out, my voice echoing in the vast space. Champion of the moon goddess. And I will bind you here for eternity if that's what it takes to keep you from devouring the world. Fenris laughed, a sound like mountains grinding together. You think your small light can hold me. I who was first. I who am hunger itself. I know the goddess held you before. I know she could do it again. And I carry her light. She fought me for 7 days, Fenris said, and now I heard amusement in its tone. 7 days of battle that reshaped the world. And you, little wolf, think you can match that? No, I admitted. I can't fight you. But I don't have to. I just have to keep you here. I began walking toward it, toward the center of the cavern where the chains anchored. With each step, I pulled more power from the mark, letting moonlight blaze from my body until I glowed like a star. Wait, Fenris said. And now there was uncertainty in its voice. What are you doing? What I was born to do. I reached the center point, where all the chains converged, and called on every ounce of power the goddess had given me. The mark on my chest exploded with light, silver radiance pouring out in waves that washed over the broken chains. I began to speak the words of binding, words the goddess had whispered to me in dreams, words in a language older than language itself. As I spoke, new chains began to form, links of moonlight wrapping around Fenris, replacing the broken ones, strengthening the weak ones. Fenris roared and thrashed, but it was already too weak to break free. I'd come just in time. The chains multiplied, wrapping around its massive form in layers, binding it tighter and tighter. But the spell required more than just power. It required an anchor, a living will to feed the chains to keep them strong. It required me. I felt the chains reach out, wrapping around my own body. Not painfully but firmly, inexorably. They anchored me to the spot, binding me to Fenris's prison as surely as Fenris itself was bound. No, Fenris howled. No, what have you done? You've chained yourself here with me. You'll spend eternity in this darkness. I know, I said calmly, even as the last of the chains locked into place. I know exactly what I've done. The spell completed. The cavern filled with silver light for one brilliant moment, then faded to a gentle glow that emanated from the new chains, and from me. I was bound. Fenris was bound. The prison was sealed. I sank to my knees, exhaustion crashing over me now that it was done. I could feel Fenris's rage, its frustrated hunger, but it couldn't touch me. The chains kept us separate even as they tied us together. Why? Fenris asked, and now its voice was quieter, almost curious. Why would you sacrifice your freedom, your life, for wolves who rejected you? For a world that cast you aside? Because it's not about me, I said. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. It's about doing what's right even when it costs everything. It's about love. Not the selfish love that demands something in return, but the true love that gives without expecting anything back. I don't understand that kind of love. I know. That's why you're the monster and I'm the hero. Fenris had no response to that. I settled into my chains, making myself as comfortable as I could, and pulled out the small iron wolf my father had made. I held it in my hand, feeling its smooth weight, its solidity. The goddess's presence washed over me, warm and gentle. Rest, daughter. You've done well. Sleep now, and when you wake, time will have passed differently than you expect. I'll watch over you. Always. I closed my eyes and despite everything I felt at peace. Had saved them. All of them. My pack, the wolves I'd never meet. The future generations who would live in a world free from Fenris's hunger because I'd been willing to pay the price. It was enough. Had to be enough. Centuries later, Cedric Ashford died at the age of 73, having led Ashford Pack through its greatest prosperity in generations. On his deathbed, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, his last words were, "Tell Rowena I kept my promise. Tell her I became better." Aldwin became Beta after Bertram retired, and later Alpha of his own pack in the Western Territories. He named his first daughter Rowena, and taught all his children about the Silver Daughter who had saved the world. The rogues Rowena had sent to Ashford Territory integrated into the pack, and their leader's grandson eventually mated with Cedric's granddaughter, joining two bloodlines that would produce strong wolves for generations. Rowena lived another 40 years in her valley, training two more Silver Daughters who appeared in that time, though neither was as strong as Rowena. Before she died, she wrote down everything she knew about the binding, everything about Rowena's sacrifice, and ensured the story would never be forgotten. And in the deep places of the earth, bound in chains of moonlight, Rowena slept and dreamed. She dreamed of running free beneath the moon. She dreamed of the village where she'd grown up, of her parents' faces, of warriors she'd trained and wolves she'd saved. She dreamed of Cedric's amber eyes and the love they'd never quite managed despite the mate bond. And sometimes in her dreams, the goddess visited her. They would talk as one might talk to a dear friend, and the goddess would tell her stories of the world above, how the packs prospered, how her sacrifice had become legend, how she was honored and remembered. "How much longer?" Rowena would ask sometimes. "How much longer must I stay?" "Until the world no longer needs protection," the goddess would reply. "Until Fenris's hunger finally fades beyond return. But take heart, daughter. Your sacrifice was not for nothing. You are loved, you are honored, and you are not forgotten." And Rowena would sleep again and dream again, and hold the iron wolf her father made, and remember that she had chosen this, that she had saved them all, that she was the hero of her own story, even if the ending wasn't what she'd hoped. And far above, in a pack house in the Ashford Territory, young wolves gathered to hear the old stories. And their favorite, always their favorite, was the tale of Rowena the Silverborn, the rejected mate who became the goddess's chosen, the common wolf who became a hero, the daughter who sacrificed everything so that others might live. "Is she still down there?" a pup would inevitably ask. "Is she still holding the chains?" "Yes," the elder would answer. "She is. And that's why we're safe. Why we can live and love and build our lives without fear. Because Rowena chose to stand in the darkness so we could live in the light." "Will she ever be free?" "Perhaps," the elder would say. "Perhaps one day when the world has changed enough, when the danger has passed completely, the goddess will release her. Or perhaps she's already free, in ways we can't understand. Time works differently in that place, after all. What feels like forever to us might feel like a moment to her." "I hope she's free," the pup would whisper. "She deserves to be free." "She was always free," the elder would correct gently. "Because she chose her fate. She wasn't forced, wasn't compelled. She walked into that darkness with her eyes open and her heart brave. That's the truest freedom there is. The freedom to choose sacrifice, to choose love, to choose what's right even when it costs everything." And the pups would nod solemnly, understanding in the way that young wolves do that they had heard something important, something that would shape them as they grew. The story of Rowena, the rejected mate who became a goddess's equal. The story of love and sacrifice and choosing to stand in darkness so others could live in light. A story that would be told for as long as wolves gathered under the moon. Dear friend, if this story touched something in your soul, if Rowena's journey spoke to your own struggles with rejection, transformation, and finding strength you didn't know you had, I want to hear from you. Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug across the miles. Because just like Rowena, your story of rising from rejection and becoming something magnificent is still being written. You are